Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Please welcome Senator Rosalind Dance from Petersburg. Good to see you.
Same here, Woody. Always good to see you.
We're beyond crossover, and I know things are still very frenetic, but you've got some really interesting initiatives dealing with education. Talk to us about those.
Yes, actually, now that crossover has gone on, and all the Senate bills are now being heard in the House, and vice versa. We're now hearing theirs. We'll find out what will be left on the table when it's all over. But one thing is consistent is that that bill that's known as the budget is one that we both will continue to be concerned about until we make that final vote. So the conferees have been assigned, those are the last, like from each, the House and the Senate. They are now going to try to compromise and figure out what will be the final budget. So we both have some, we just said, some very golden nuggets that are there that we want to be on the table at the end. When it comes to education, one that's very important to, I would say, to minorities, low income, African Americans, or you would say is a bill that is a budget amendment. Really, the governor put in his budget about $36 million for that special group that falls into those schools that have a high poverty level, and they, as far as to be on the playing field with the rest of the schools and make sure those kids have a chance of a quality education. Then we asked for extra money. The governor put it there. I actually, in the Senate, carry a budget amendment that would have given $28.5 million towards that to help those particular school districts. And at this point, it's about 21.5, which is is not where we want to be, but it's a great number to work with as the conferees start working, and I will continue to work with my colleagues. But on the House side, the concern is that it has not been funded, because what you want is that you'd like to have, maybe if I put in 28.5 and the governor put in 36, maybe the House would have said 40. And then we work it into a reasonable number, because we have to deal with all of Virginia's needs. And that might have gotten us to a number where we could really make a significant difference in the quality of education that we can provide to all Virginians. So that's one that we're going to be watching. That's one that we're not going to just be watching, that we're going to be advocating for, that we're going to be working from both sides, because we've had so much negative publicity about who are Virginians in the last few weeks, that we will show America, we will show the world that Virginia is for everybody, and we love everybody, and it's going to be reflected in these bills, this legislation, especially the budget bill, that reflects how well we are ensuring that all of the school systems receive what they need to provide that quality education. So that's one of the areas that we're looking at. We're also looking at the fact that the ratio of counselors is another bill that I carried, and the funding is there, not the amount the desired amount, but it's a good start. We're starting with $12 million, and I wanted $36 million, but again, the work is there. But it looks at the fact of how we can transition from the 1 to 500 ratio as far as student to counselor to 1 to 250, 1 to 250.
And I also understand those counselors now will be required to spend 80% of their time actually counseling students.
And that's the key. it's changed, the title changes from guidance counselors to school counselors, which is significant because it says not only will they be addressing the academic part of it, and that's normally when you say a counselor, you say they're going to help me prepare, make sure I'm taking the classes I need to be able to transition from here to college, to VOTEC, wherever it is that I want to go. But it's more than that, because that counselor is a person that can deal with the mental health issues, especially the behavior issues, identify them at an early spot wherein prevention can take place. But if not prevention, early intervention, all those things that would prevent us from saying that we are memorialized in the Parkland situation as far as losing lives of children, that instead we can let them have a quality of life that's not only the medical but the behavioral part that instills a quality of life for a child to learn in an environment they can learn in a safe environment and grow from that. So that's important, and right now that is still there on both sides. So I'm excited about that we're being able to provide that, because that impacts all children, not minorities, all children, and that's what we seek to do, to take care of all of Virginia.
What about the continued use of school resource officers who are, most of them are former law enforcement, and they have a different perspective on how to handle kids in schools? And
that also requires training, and they're within that budget. And we have language budget. We have not only we have money, but we also, people forget that there is language that sometimes is more valuable, just as valuable, or more so sometimes, because it's long term, as far as a value that comes from ensuring that you are providing the necessary tools for them to be successful. Because just saying that you have somebody there, but if they don't have the right skills, knowledge, and abilities, and the right attitude to do the job, they won't fit. And that's what we're concerned about, making sure there is a good fit. So that element is also there. We also have some electronic apps that is going to be there as far as school safety, to make sure that even though there's policing, there's a way of providing safety at the level that it's just a matter of each school could have this identified app that'll let you know where to go and whatever, because we sometimes have kids that have these apps, and they have these little phones, little smartphones, that they can't use them for anything but certain things. They go on and off at certain times. But it's different mechanisms that we use to try to protect our own.
What about the use of closed-circuit TVs in the schools to monitor ingress and egress and just student-teacher activity?
Well, sometimes people say you see too much, but I think that is a good program. And I tell you, I can't talk in depth about something that I'm not into, Woody, because there's so much that we address, and so that's probably some bills or some intricacies of a bill that's there, but I can't talk to that one because that's not really in my wheelhouse right now. But I can tell you that having served on the school safety task force in Chesterfield, that one of the being also representative for Petersburg, that I know what has been very helpful for Petersburg is something that we call, that is the school-based healthcare centers, that also provides like a series of the behavioral health, the medical intervention, whatever that a student might need, like while during the school hours. And again, you deal with the poverty levels as far as parents are working and can't get them to where they need to be during the day, that there are centers that would be located at the school, not run by the school, but actually the professional staff that would need to be there that could provide those services. They can even do insurance billings, as far as a sliding scale for low income, all those things to allow a student to go to school and learn. When I think about education, the grocery fund bill that deals with an opportunity for them to come, like we have in school, we provide food in school for the kids now, lunches, and we don't use that scale of the sliding scale to say, what if you want a meal, you get a meal, is the way we do it in the schools. But it also says that within the communities where we have the food deserts, where kids do not have access to certain foods, we found that when given that opportunity in school, they make good selections. So if we can offer incentives to the little small grocery or the mom and pop store, that they can put that refrigerator in there that will allow them, and this is what the fund would do, so like offset some costs to allow them to be able to have those opportunities for kids to get fresh fruits, vegetables, or whatever is needed.
That goes hand in hand, does it not, with some other legislation you have regarding temporary assistance for needy families?
Yes, and that we call it the TANF, but right. But so we look at funding for any of those. It's like it's temporary assistance. It's a hand up, not a handout, but to help people that a lot of times you're working, but you just need a little bit more to be able to meet the needs of your family, and so they take that into consideration with the services that are provided. So that's another way that we help, but it's a long 2 weeks or so before we leave here. But hopefully when we leave here, that the legislation that we pass is going to be good for Virginia. And a part of that is that bill that's known as a budget that will determine whether or not we have a budget that meets the needs of all Virginians or some. And we're going to be held to a high test because America, we've been in everybody's living room. They've heard about Virginia. It used to be Virginia is for lovers, but they're not saying that as loudly as they should. But we're going to prove that that is still a slogan that fits Virginia, because we're going to show them by our actions, not just by what we say.
And of course, part of the budgetary proposals relates to something that's near and dear to your district, and that is housing and the high eviction rates.
Yes, and there is funds in both the Senate and the housing budget to allow for that. We actually increased funding in our housing trust fund, and we've allowed for funding for legal support to. No, it is a balanced thing. We're not trying to say landowners, we're going to make people, you keep people that are, some of them that's just trying to beat the system. But sometimes the reality is that people that have been paying their rent or the housing, and then there's something happened in the family, they lost a job temporarily, they're trying to get back on their feet, they had a medical condition or whatever. So there are things that we're going to try to work with them to make sure that the landlord, because they have properties, and their livelihood probably depends on whether or not they're receiving the monies that from that rental property or whatever. But to make sure it's a win-win, that we don't put people in the street, we take care of the landlords, and in some cases, budget management. We're helping that person that has not been paying their rent learn the importance of budgeting and making sure that they can get it done. But they will have the legal assistance, and they will also have some financial support with making sure that they can take care of that.
Taking advantage of your background in healthcare, are there enough nurses in the schools?
Well, that is another issue as far as the ratio of nurses. But again, when I talk about the school-based healthcare centers,
yes,
that would be a means of, like the school provides a certain amount, but with the healthcare centers, there can be a professional group that's providing these services as well. Again, with that sliding scale that says wherever you are, that we will, the cost will fit what your ability is to pay. And those organizations are really run mostly by private monies or foundations that offset that. In Petersburg, we have the Cameron Foundation that was a result of the closure of the selling of our hospital, and became a private entity, and all that funds was then turned into a foundation that now gives money back to the community as far as health care, education, health care, and sometimes economically, because you find out that the strength of a community, the health level of a community is based on its economic status. So those are different opportunities that we have to try to help people.
How important are the teacher raises?
That is one of the many things, but what you'll hear from the teachers is they want us to deal with the counselors and all those other things, because they said the money is fine, which is a good thing to hear from teachers, right? To say, yeah, we appreciate the 5% raise, but we also know the importance of you ensuring that we have those school counselors and that they are going to be taking care of those things that they are trained to do, instead of us who trained to teach, having to teach and also be the behavioral specialist, the social worker, the nurse, all things to make sure that the child have their needs met, and try to teach too. So when they are allowed to teach, that's a wonderful thing. When they are provided the materials that they need to use to teach with, that's a wonderful thing. Because if we're not providing those type of supports for them, they're using their own money to pay for that. I've heard teachers say that they know that they're going to spend $1,000 and the supplies that they have to get to make sure that they can provide the quality instructions that a kid needs to learn.
Now, what kind of pressure do those raises put on local school districts who may not be able to afford it?
Well, that's a question that comes up, and I haven't heard any of them within my district say that that's a problem that they don't want to have to worry with, because you got to realize that the people that normally they serve on the school boards and teach in the schools, they got kids too, so it's a reciprocal thing. They know that in order to be able to work and to keep quality teachers, they want a standard of living too that we have to pay them. Because what happens again, the areas that need them most, those that thriving low income need really good teachers to be able to break the barriers and to raise the level of performance for kids that have not had all of the tools necessary to succeed. So you need to be able to recruit them, number one, so you got to have the funds to pay them.
And what about the physical condition of the schools in your district? I know that's an issue statewide, actually.
That's another thing, and that's why we increased funds, and like say there used to be the literary fund, and now we're trying to go back to that, and we put money there. And again, before we leave here, we're revisiting that again as we look at, does this budget really address the needs to ensure that everybody can rise and the quality of education and services are there for all. So that is one, because the schools, and you'll hear that across Virginia, it's not germane just to one area, is that the lifespan of the schools and a lot of the districts have long since passed, and they're not healthy. That we're talking about bringing in the school-based healthcare centers, we're talking about bringing in the professionals to address the issues, but it's the buildings themselves that are not healthy that have to be addressed.
Now, what about the economy in Petersburg and in your district? Has it improved over the last few years?
I would say that for Petersburg, since you asked in general, that we struggle financially, and if you were talking about real estate, they said that property is underwater. That means you can't get, there is no value there if you wanted to sell it. But we've risen from that level of underwater to Standards & Poor. The last rating said that from no rating we've gone to a ++B. And they said we're moving in the right direction. Our schools are accredited, and that's definitely the first time in about 30-some years that we can say all of our schools have a level of certification, and that's a great thing to say we're moving in the right direction.
Now, this whole budget has a huge impact on the AAA bond rating that the state has maintained for years. Mm-hmm. I believe there's more money that's going to go to the rainy day fund, yes, for example.
Yes, because it's Virginia is zero balance. It says our revenues and our expenses must balance out. We cannot spend more than we have.
Unlike the federal government. Well,
you said it. But along with that, there is a responsibility to ensure that we also build that safety net, that if we have the catastrophes or disasters are to occur as they will, that we are prepared for that, and it doesn't require us to then change directions and not be able to fulfill the needs of Virginians because of that. We're in a healthy state, and this is a time when you do that you put more, that you save. We don't spend it all. That's the time when people say, you got more money, so let's spend more. But we still have to be fiscally responsible for what we do, and that's the rationale for that. And that also, when people are looking at whether or not to invest in us as far as bonds, when we talk about schools and the rest, when they look at Virginia overall, it says that we are sound because we are doing that. We're not living from what people say they have to do at times, living from paycheck to paycheck. We are living with a budget that we see as sound, it's balanced, and there are reserves in case there are problems down the way.
To what extent are there equal opportunities for access to education at our historically black colleges and universities?
That's also a funding issue as far as when we say that, and this year, just like more so than ever, we're doing those comparisons because We do have African Americans that serve on appropriations in the House and that serve on finance in the Senate. Now, in the House, there are quite a few members, but we have something that's unique because normally the conferees come from the normally have been from the majority party as far as the head people, but we've had one of our conferees, the only conferee in the House that's African American, Delegate Luke Torian.
Matter of fact, he chairs one of the subcommittees on appropriations.
Yes, capital outlay, and that's very important to HBCUs because when it comes to all state buildings and the universities, the state-run universities falls under that, he has an opportunity to look at that and objectively look at that and see where there is a need to fund. So we're getting the same eye as all other universities and colleges around the Commonwealth, because he has that same eye that looks at all and doesn't try to distinguish this or that in a negative way, but in a positive way. And I think it's helping, especially I know Norfolk State, Virginia State are being seen in an equal light. But again, we're coming from behind, so we're not there. But again, incrementally, we are starting at least to move in the right direction to ensure that all of these schools are being seen equitably as far as moving forward what the needs are and how they should be funded accordingly. And where we see that there is, and we're doing the analysis, we've learned how to do the analysis. We're not just sitting there. It's a learning opportunity to see how and ask the questions, why this and not that.
Now, one of the things that came out of the tax conformity package relates to a potential refund for an individual of $110 and for a couple $220. But I guess that was in lieu of the earned income tax credit?
What they looked at in is, like so they say, it's complex, it's complicated. It surely is. That's why they say you go to your tax person. But to simplify it or to streamline it is that come October, before elections, you will receive, if you worked and if you earned, you paid taxes in, you paid $90 in, you get your $90 back plus $110, $15, whatever it is. If you're married, that doubles. So you're going to get some money back, a refund back this year. And then it's we look at the impact as far as if you're below 25,000, what it will be. If it's 50,000 below and 70,000 below, those is like they say from low to mid to middle class. If you consider 70,000 lower mid class, because you know numbers go up, but those are the areas that the concentration is in. And they found that below the 50,000, they could pick up more than just those. They would pick up and like expand it over, helping more than less. But as far as just that pocket that we were looking at, that did not win the day. But again, the governor hasn't had his sway because that's a veto process that he had. But the key is that his Secretary of Finance, Arby Lane, is his voice and his negotiator with the money committees, and saw the value in that as well. So that's where we are. Now,
I think it's interesting that this is the 400th year of the beginning of the House of Burgess, which is now the General Assembly, but we're still dealing with some vestiges of racism, and I know you and Senator Spruill have some legislation dealing with the minimum wage for certain professions.
Minimum wage, and I will tell you this, there are positives and negatives. The negative is that my bill did not pass out of the Senate to have the good fight in the House and become law. But it moved further than it has before because we were able to get it from the committee to the floor of the Senate for a full debate and have people vote on it. And it says we're close but no cigar, but next year is coming. And where our chances hopefully will increase as far as just a few more colleagues from both sides of the aisle realizing the importance that $7.25 an hour is not a reasonable salary for one that is willing to work hard to take care of their family, that they just cannot do it off that amount of money. And when you put restrictions on it so you don't get overtime, that will help offset that $7.25 an hour. It is impossible to do that, and my colleagues would not want to do that, and I want enough of them to realize that we should not do that to the people we serve.
And I take it that to change the subject for a moment, the issues around the coal ash controversy has now been resolved.
Well, let's say this. There's always those who are still, like I said, it's easier to critique than to create. So there's still some more critiquers, but they're not at the level that they would stop this bill from moving forward, because it has cleared all the bars. The last bar has been cleared, and this bill is going to be signed into law. But it is a coming together of the environmental community and the industry, and I would say the utility service that was involved as far as the coal ash, and the people, most important, the constituents, especially mine, because in Chesterfield I had 2 of those coal ash ponds, and the people's concern was first, and that was my message for them, first do no harm. That there should not be anything that's in the soil or in the water, in the air, that will affect them negatively with this exchange. And number 2, it should not impact their ability to go freely in and out of their community, their neighborhood, because that was the threat of 350 trucks a day for the next 15 years was just not acceptable. All of those issues were borne out. There was concern about Henricus Park and how that might be affected because of the connection. Looking at the part of may have to change the boat ramp. But the memorandum of understanding from the industry to the governing body of Chesterfield County, that Henricus Park, their ability to use that park as they are doing freely, will not be impacted by the need to encapsulate and remove that coal ash from its existing sites. So that is where we are with that, and it was an honor to serve with the men and women of the Senate and the House and all of the special interest groups that came to the table to reach, we said, that peace in the valley, which is hard to come by, but took 4 years. But there's peace in the valley with coal ash.
Got about a minute left. I wanted you to have the opportunity to comment upon what is going to happen in terms of some type of independent, bipartisan, or nonpartisan redistricting commission.
I serve on privileges and elections, and believe it or not, that the bill that came out was a bipartisan bill that came out that has cleared the House and the Senate, and should be, unless there might be a little conferencing if there's a difference between the 2 bills, but there should be a bill that is should be considered independent of the General Assembly. You know, we're going to have some say in it, but that will give us a better shot at ensuring that people get to elect their legislators instead of us electing who we want to elect us.
And I take it you prefer what came out of the Senate versus what has come out of the House?
Of course.
Well, thank you for being here, Senator Rosalind Dance. Good to see you, and good luck the remainder of the session.
Thank you, Woody. Always good to see you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.